Hey, what's up guys? This is T-Bone here. So in today's episode, I'm going to be continuing my discussion about the update that's coming in July for the game Heir of Chaos. And in this episode, I'm going to be talking about Tazar and also the Fortress faction. We're going to take a look at the hero and the units, and then we're going to see them in action also. Now, Tazar and Fortress, they're all about weakening your enemies. So if you take a look at the Ultimate Skill Deathmatch, what it does is it gives 2 debuffs to all the units on the field, including yours. But the difference here is debuffs are good for your units because they gain additional damage boost. During this time, no one can get heals, but your units are gaining life drain, and also you're getting additional unit damage reduction as well as critical hit. Life Drain doesn't count as a healing spell, so you're going to get that health back through that. And it's a very long lasting spell at 23.4 seconds at level 25, so it also has a very long cooldown. And if you take a look at the specialties, there's 2 specialties that I think are really important. The first one is a 1-stars, where you're immune to freeze, petrification, and time stop for all Fortress units. So that's basically a hard counter to Adelaide, Jedi, and Sephiroth. Then at 4 stars, you also give Hydra an ability to be immune to stun on top of everything else, and it has a guaranteed skill to give you additional damage and also additional critical hit. So the combination is all about, weakening while strengthening your own units. Now, if you take a look at the faction as a whole, there's 7 units, and there are, there's Hydra, Gorgon, Serpentfly, Wyvern, Basilisk, Knoll, and Lizardman. Now, if you pay attention there's 3 attackers, 2 defenders, 1 caster, and 1 ranged unit. There's no charge unit at all. So it's a very different gameplay and also a very different roster setup. And also, if you take a look at Hydra, there is a couple of skills that I think are very important and very interesting. Headbutt gives you 4 additional hits on top of the regular attacks that it deals. And then Chasing Bite is what Tazar at 4 stars gives you an additional or a guaranteed Chasing Bite, and that basically gives you an additional attack, and that does more damage as well as a guaranteed critical hit. So Hydra is basically getting lots of extra hits in every time, and you're going to see in the interactions later that it does do a lot of damage, and it's one of the main damage dealers here. And so Hydra really is the core component of the Fortress faction, especially if you want to be using Tazar. Now let's take a look at the units in action with the other units in the game also. So one thing I think is interesting is to test out individual units, and in this case I'm going to be testing out Hydra, and I'll be going up against Iron Golem, which has magic resistance, and it's basically a control unit that I will be using to test against various units. This is what I did when I was playing around. Now, Tazar with Hydra is a really good combination because, with all the debuffs, it just powers up the Hydra. So you can see that the Iron Golem is just taking so much damage, and it doesn't last very long against it at all. But if you compare Gorgon instead up against Iron Golem, take a look and see here that the Iron Golem is holding its own a lot better, and Gorgon is actually taking a lot of damage, especially from magic spells. So, Gorgon isn't really strong against magic damage, and even though it has the ability to potentially deal, enough damage to one-shot kill an enemy here, you can see Gorgon actually loses one-on-one against Iron Golem just because it's weak against magic attacks. So one thing I had mentioned is that the Fortress units seem like it's going to be a hard counter to Adelaide, and we're going to take a look. So what we have here is exactly the same composition of units here, and we're using Adelaide, which specializes in control. But if you take a look here, Deathmatch is going to be the first spell that we cast, and so all of the units are going to get debuffs here, and when they get debuffed, all your Fortress units will get additional buff, and they're going to deal more damage. But unfortunately, Adelaide isn't very effective at all. So you can see here, Ice Wall is doing nothing to the units here, and this is a huge deal, right? So Ice Wall and also just freeze, all of these these spells can actually make a huge difference in the fight. But in this case, because it doesn't do anything, the hero isn't helpful at all. And so you can see here, with the same unit, with a different hero, Adelaide will lose every time against the Fortress units. And now let's try our setup against Dragon Mutari's team. But since Dragon Mutari's team requires 8 units because of the addition of Green Dragon, we're just going to simply put Green Dragon in here also. And we're just going to put it at the top here. And now let's take a look and see an 8-on-8 battle, Fortress faction versus Dungeon faction, and see how they fare. So with Dungeon faction, it's all about, with Dragon Mutari, it's really all about the Black Dragon and also the Green Dragon's ability to basically poison down everybody in the lane. And let's take a look here. So there's no charger, so the the charging units, Harpy as well as Manticore can become a bit of a nuisance to the team here. But as you can see here, the team is still losing out. So despite losing, early some of the units in the back, again, led by Hydra, Hydra is able to just continually walk through this setup here. And so this is a super strong team. Like, the faction seems really, really strong here. And of course, no test will be complete if you don't test against Sandro. So let's go ahead and go up against Sandro's team. But because you can field 8 units with Necro units, I added 1 Necro Defender here, and this is the setup I'm going to use for the Necro. And now let's take a look and see how we fare up against Sandro. You can see though there is a pretty big power difference between Sandro and also Tazar. What's interesting here is whether or not the debuffs from Sandro will count towards powering up our units, and also how would we fare against 2 of the strongest charging units in the game right now. And so we've casted our ultimate spell, but you can see that the unit generally they're very weak to spells, and you can see that Sandro's Sandro's spell for Darkest Hour just dealt a ton of damage to our Fortress faction units. Hydra is still doing really well, but everybody else, all the other units, have started falling. And you can see here, so Hydra is still the last unit standing, but unfortunately it could not last. And so by itself, it looks like the Fortress faction isn't necessarily an answer to Necro and to Sandro, but it's shown that it's really powerful against others as well. So it's not the most overpowered faction for sure, and it definitely doesn't look like a full counter to Sandro, but I think it does have a lot of really good potential as a faction. Now let's take a look and see how this team fares against a Solmir-led team, and this particular setup is actually, it closely mirrors the setup I normally would use also, and so I'm interested to see how this engagement would go. And so again, this is going to be 7-on-7. We've got Angel and also a Behemoth and Ogre on our side, and because it's with Solmir, I also have the Storm Elemental. Now, really, I think the big thing here is the combination of the ultimate spell, Deathmatch, and Hydra really sort of is the core of this entire setup here. Now, of course, you got other units that are casting spells and skills that are causing plague, so that units are getting damaged over time. But I think that Hydra really is the big difference maker. As you can see here, it's going up against the Ogre and it's taking it out. Then it's going to go up against Angel, and now Angel's going to get taken out. And then finally, it's going to come back and go up against the Behemoth. But you can see here, there is a lot of headbutt going on. You can see the word headbutt coming on constantly. And so really, that's where you're getting a ton of just additional damage from each of those hits. And so eventually, it does, it's close, but it does eventually beat the Solmir team. But it is very close, so I think it depends on the configuration and setup. Solmir-led team can still be successful against the Fortress faction. Finally, let's try out this team against Zeron's Infernal units. Interestingly, as I tested this, I would say that I lose and win about half the time. And so this is one of those situations where it's not a guarantee if I can win. And so there is a little bit of an element of randomness going on as well. And so with Zeron, really, it's all about the fact that it could, have the Devil go to the back line and take out the range units and also the casters, and also have that immunity when it casts the ultimate. And for the Fortress units, it's going to be about the Hydra and its ability to break through the front. So you can see here the Hydra is up the top. You can just see a bunch of headbutts, and it's attacking against Demon. So it's a really good matchup against Demon, actually. And so you can see that the Demon's health is going down right now, and it's about to to die, and as soon as it does, then it's going to come back and it's going to attack Devil. But during this time, Devil is going to gain immunity also. So you can see here the Fortress faction is losing a little bit, but we're able to take out the Devil just a little bit too late. And now look at how little health is remaining on both ends, and we just barely lost out with this setup with a sliver of health on the Infernal side. And so it's not a guaranteed win. I think Fortress is still a really good faction, really fun, really interesting, but I think it really does depend also on your matchup, and so it's definitely not a one faction that beats all. There are definitely counters to it also. And now you can see here in a follow-up fight, it is still very close, but you can see that we're now going to be able to take out the Devil, followed by the Free Sultan right afterwards. So this is what I was talking about, like, you know, with the same setup, you could still win or lose with this particular faction against at least Zeron and the Infernals. And that's all for this episode. Thanks a lot for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are. What did you think about the Fortress faction, and what did you think about Tazar, and about the interactions with the other heroes here? I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Comment down below, let me know what you think. And I have other videos for other parts of the update for July, and keep in tune for that. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.